Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. The Supreme Court has ruled that Trump can stay on the ballot despite being an insurrectionist. That's their words. An oath-breaking insurrectionist. Interesting. Trump supporters also have been caught sharing AI-generated images of Trump with Black people. And the University of Florida has fired all DE&I workers. And the Mississippi Police Department in one of the nation's poorest countries or counties, I should say, unconstitutionally would jail people for unpaid fines without first assessing whether they could afford to pay them, according to the United States Department of Justice. And an Oklahoma school district is under fire for an absolutely abhorrent fundraiser where students were licking peanut butter off the feet of other students and what appeared to be some teachers and faculty members. We discuss all of that this morning with our guests, career litigator from the Transformative Justice Coalition, Attorney Darrell Jones, and Texas Rep. Ron Reynolds, the chair of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus and the Texas House Progressive Caucus. Good morning, gentlemen. Good to see you both. I can't hear you, Representative Reynolds. I think you're on mute. You're still muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
There you go.
Right,
there you go. Welcome, welcome.
Good to see you both. Good to see you both.
Good to see you guys.
Stacey, I thought that the Texas governor got in a hold of.
Uh-oh. Now that is something to be concerned about, isn't it? Guys, the Supreme Court handed a sweeping win to former President Donald Trump by ruling states cannot kick him off the ballot over his actions leading up to the January 6th attack on the Capitol, bringing a swift end to a case with huge implications for the 2024 election. The court, in an unsigned ruling with no dissents, reversed the Colorado Supreme Court, which determined that Trump could not serve again as president under Section 3 of the Constitution's 14th Amendment. The provision prohibits those who previously held government positions but later engaged in insurrection from running for various offices. The court said that the Colorado Supreme Court had wrongly assumed that states can determine whether a presidential candidate or other candidate for federal office is ineligible. The ruling makes it clear that the Congress, not states, has to set rules on how the 14th Amendment provision can be enforced against federal office seekers. So here we are. You guys know the ruling, Representative Reynolds, by deciding the case on that legal question. The court avoided any analysis or determinations of whether Trump's actions constituted an insurrection. So what does it all mean from a legislative standpoint?
Well, first of all, I think that it's important that it was a unanimous ruling. I think that if it was a divided ruling like they've been typically on a partisan basis, then it would have sent a very divisive message to the country that's already very polarized. This Supreme Court is very, very polarized, no question about it. We've seen it, whether it's, gutting Roe versus Wade, decisions on voting rights, decisions on affirmative action, things of that nature. So the fact that this Supreme Court decision was unanimous, I think was a good thing. I think the court certainly was very careful to avoid weighing in on whether or not Trump can be on the ballot. I mean, they basically said, hey, you know what? If the Congress wants to have definitions for what makes a person ineligible, they need to pass legislation. So that they basically punted it, making it more of a legislative issue. And I think that's important. Although they didn't rule on whether or not there was an insurrection, I think that there was sufficient evidence if they had a hearing that would make it likely that, they would find him, there was preponderance of the evidence that he was an insurrectionist, but they avoided that question. I think that the court even though I'm very, very strongly against Trump, this may surprise some people. I think the court got it right. Why do I say that? Because if the Supreme Court allows for states to do this, then you could easily have Colorado did this to Trump. You could easily have Texas say, okay, we're going to screw Biden out of the ballot based on some nuance. I think that is the wrong thing. I think we should basically let the people decide at the ballot box who serves as president or any other office holder. I think if Congress or the legislature wants to clearly define what makes a person ineligible, that they could do that by taking act. So I think the Supreme Court definitely got it right in this situation. And I think this makes it clear that as we talk today on Super Tuesday, it is the power of the people who will decide who should serve as president of the United States, not some technicality based on Colorado's interpretation of the Constitution.
Well, Representative Reynolds, and before we bring in that great legal mind, Darrell Jones, um, let me ask you this though. You had a couple of the liberal justices, although they went along with the decision, they, like I said, it was unanimous. They did in their writings label him an oath-breaking insurrectionist. What does it say that someone like that is on the ballot and is
Well,
allowed to be on the ballot?
you know, Stacey, I think it sets a bad message. I mean, first of all, you have to wonder why would the Republican Party continue to elect him, right? I mean, he's winning overwhelmingly. Today should be over with. Nikki Haley's on life support. She really isn't a viable candidate. Trump has ran away with it. And today's results at the end of the day, I'm predicting, absent some miracle, that he's going to blow her away. He's
Hmm.
blown her away in every state except in DC, which is a very small primary.
Yeah,
So
2,000
the,
voters in
the
DC.
point I'm making is that we should really analyze the people that are elected him, these quote Christian conservative, these MAGA extremists that are allowing him to win these elections when they know that he's been incited January 6th. They know that he said he'll grab him by the P. They know that he's made racial comments. He's made misogynist comments. He's denigrated Jews and you know, basically supported white supremacists and neo-Nazis. He's been anti-Semitic. This guy is the worst president I've ever seen in this country. Yet it's still, there are so many people that still worship at the altar of Trump. That's the real question. I don't think the Supreme Court really, you know, should be weighing in on his legitimacy. I think the voters should decide as the power of the people. And now, what really strikes me even more scary, Stacey, is that the recent polling consistently shows that Trump is leading Biden in many of the swing states and other places around the country. So we need to have a wake-up call. We need to have a come to Jesus moment that says, this what we really want as the leader of the free world, as the president of these United States of America? What does it say about our values if we can elect a person of that type of moral depravity, that kind of person that is incredulous, that kind of person that has no scruples, that, you know, you just had all these a record number of indictments. He's facing criminal charges after criminal charges. The only thing that he can hope for is technicalities, because if he goes to trial, he's likely to be found guilty, just like he's been in New York on these record amounts of civil judgments against him. And he's likely going to have another bankruptcy to avoid paying. So this is one of the worst presidents, if not the worst president of the United States. And right now, he's the leading contender, not just for the Republican primary, which he's going to wrap that up likely today, but he's leading President Biden in the polls. So I think it's more of a question of where we are as a country, that we would want to place a priority on electing someone like Donald Trump.
And Attorney Jones, as a litigator, legal strategies, what might be employed by states like Colorado who want him off the ballot in response to this ruling? And how could Congress potentially address concerns about accountability for actions such as the Capitol attack?
Well, at this point, there's not going to be a lot that states can do because the Supreme Court has weighed in on it. So it's not like they can now come up with a strategy, a legal strategy, to remove him off of the ballot. That's been decided and done. Interestingly, um, sort of all along this journey, uh, in my mind and in many strategists' minds, this decision from the Supreme Court had already been made. And I tell you why I say that. Colorado's vote is today. Okay, so
Mhm.
if we're talking about removing somebody from the ballot, they're voting already. People overseas
Right.
have already voted. And so, those things are already out there. We're already in play. So I bet you would be talking about what the general election, and so and what candidate you're moving forward. So, in that analysis, what I'm saying is this: that you would have really rendered uh, hundreds of thousands of voters' votes insignificant already. You would have canceled out their votes that they put in this primary election. They could have gone in a different direction had they known that he was going to be removed from the ballot. So the Supreme
Mhm.
Court really didn't have, I don't think, on the factual, just the practical thing of what it meant. They had already limited what they could do. Now, I'm not
Right.
saying that I'm in disagreement with their decision, only because when you look at it on the practical side and the legal side, although Section 3 of the 14th Amendment talks about disqualifying someone if they are an insurrectionist, and it's one of the Reconstruction amendments that we're talking about. The problem becomes, and I think that Justices Kagan, Sotomayor, and Jackson get it right, that on the very limited area of whether or not you're going to start allowing state by state to decide who is on the ballot goes against the federalism of our country. Because then, it's not a country, it's not our federalist system that's electing and deciding those major issues. You're allowing Colorado, you're allowing Michigan, you're allowing, Illinois just passed one, right? You're allowing Illinois to play a role. But it becomes really interesting because they just go too far. The majority goes too far in this case. Because what happens with the majority in this case is the majority then goes through to try to tell what needs to happen, right? What Congress
Right.
needs to do. And that's where, it becomes really, problematic with regards to their decision. But based on what we call the Purcell rule, that you're not supposed to interfere with a case when it's that close to an election dealing with voting rights, the Supreme Court probably did what was the appropriate thing to do. And overall, we've had so many times we've been kicked in the teeth by the Supreme Court. I do not have confidence that when the immunity case comes before them, that they are going to do anything other than punt it as long as they can. And that's what they've already demonstrated, right? We've seen how quickly they can decide cases. But when it comes to
Mhm.
the immunity of former President Trump and for his criminal liability, they're pushing that out as far as they can. They pushed it out to April, and who knows when they come back with a decision. So there's
Right.
a lot of
Right.
concern, that's there from this court, but certainly some basic understanding of why they did what they did in this situation.
Yeah, and so we've seen Trump. You mentioned Representative Reynolds in particular. You mentioned the 91 criminal charges against him. The twice he's been found by a civil jury to have sexually assaulted a woman. The business fraud, massive business fraud, go on and on and on. But we watched him turn all of that into uh, campaign rallies. We've watched him turn all that into what appears because everything is not what it appears with Donald Trump. We know, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute with the deep fakes. But um, we watched him turn those into what appears to be positives. Does this ruling, him staying on the ballot, was it ill conceived, first of all, that Colorado did this, understanding that when you read the 14th Amendment, it does not single out or seems to point to presidents. It does point to other people in the federal government or at least state government. Anyway, it does not seem to point to the president. What is this a? How do voters react to this? How do you see voters reacting to this?
Stacey, here's the thing. I mean, I think I'm a pretty level-headed person, and I'm out there in the community. I travel around the country, and it baffles me. Honestly, I'm not kidding you, you guys. I am freaking blown away at the people who are continuously to support Donald Trump for president. I would lose all my money if you told me, based on everything you just read, Stacey, if people still support this man to be the freaking president of the United States of America. I wouldn't vote for him for dog catcher, yet alone the president of the United States of America, the man who has the codes to the nuclear weapons, the
Mm.
person who is the leader of the free world, who is the face of the United States of America. He's the laughing stock of other countries. He is the person that makes a mockery of any person with civility. I mean, this is the guy that you want to be the president. So, Stacey, clearly I'm out of touch with what the Republican electorate want, because they had other choices. Even though I'm no Nikki Haley fan, I'm no Ron DeSantis fan, I'm no Chris Christie, but they had a lot of choices. They had a whole bunch of people that were vying to be an alternative to Donald
Mhm.
Trump, and overwhelmingly they chose Donald Trump. He was embroiled in all kind of things. He wasn't even really focused on a campaign. I mean, honestly, he's been more in courts, protecting his civil and his criminal freedom than campaigning. But the people are just loyal to him, and so I don't understand. Every time there was a new indictment, his poll numbers went
We think we lost Representative Reynolds for a moment, but Attorney Jones, you've litigated at just about every level there is to
up. Is
litigate
it not?
at. So many. I'm sorry, Representative Reynolds, we lost you for a moment. We'll come back to you in a
Okay.
second. But Attorney Jones, so many Americans seem to have lost confidence in the courts. How do we get that back, if it's possible?
Well, Stacey, that's one of the things that I've been talking about is the percentage of Americans that are disillusioned, lost faith in the Supreme Court, with all of the actions from the justices questioning their conflicts of interest and what they're not disclosing. So all of that really has been at play for a couple of years now. And so the Supreme Court has the lowest level of appreciation and respect that it's ever had in our country's history. The way that I think that the court starts to gain its respect back is it's got to make those decisions that are difficult to make and stop playing political, hot potato with issues. The reason that we give and the Constitution makes Supreme Court justices lifetime appointments is so that they don't have to give in to the pressures of any party or any of the politics of it all, that they're supposed to be above that. And so one way that they can begin to get it back is stop playing the political football game with the issues that are coming up. I don't think that they should slow walk the immunity case, the criminal immunity case. They need to, recognize the sincerity of it, bring it up right now because they can do it right now, and make a decision based on a law. Just make it based on a law, not politics, the law. And so that's how I think the court regains its belief and its integrity. Because right now their integrity is suffering. But if they continue down the road they're going down, just sort of rubber stamping what the Federalist Society lays down, these far right conservative theories, it's going to continue to beg the question. And we got to remember that the majority of the justices that sit on the Supreme Court were not appointed by presidents that won the popular vote. They were appointed by presidents that lost the popular vote. So it's not that they represent the majority of Americans in thought. They don't. They were appointed by presidents that did not. So, they have a really high hurdle to overcome if they want their integrity restored, and they better start doing it because they're not doing anything to restore that integrity.
Yeah, David Youngblood mentions that the courts themselves are to blame for the lack of trust and respect in it. He says their rulings and the swiftness with which they take a case or slow walk one is clear and biased. And um, And of course, yep, Power 96 mentions that thanks to freeze frame Mitch McConnell, that court is 6-3 and heavy on the conservative. Representative Reynolds, with this ruling, the Supreme Court's ruling, uh, have you have anybody reached out to you from any federal lawmakers, anybody from the Congressional Black Caucus reached out to you, or do you know of any discussions going on with state lawmakers like yourself and federal lawmakers in the wake of this decision?
Not yet, Stacy, and I think it's probably unlikely with a. I mean, realistically, we have a divided government. The Republicans are in charge of the House of Representatives, and the Democrats barely control the U.S. Senate, and of course, Biden is in the White House. So, therefore, any piece of legislation that Democrats or the Congressional Black Caucus want to pass to be able to have some clarity in the law to eliminate an instance like Trump being able to serve on the ballot for being an insurrectionist or inciting an insurrection, that's never going to happen with the Republicans. They're never going to support that, right? Even though it's the right thing to do for the country, they won't do it. And so I don't think that there's any real effort right now to do it. I think that you could see this revisited if the Democrats get back control of the House and there's a Speaker, Hakeem Jeffries, which I hope there is, and then the Democrats get maintain control of the Senate and get a filibuster-proof Senate. In other words, they get a Senate that can overcome a filibuster because therefore you can get things passed that don't have to be watered down to appease the Republicans. And then, of course, Biden being reelected, a blue trifecta is what we call it. So barring that, it's unlikely that we're going to see any serious piece of legislation to make in law efforts to keep someone off the ballot that shouldn't be on the ballot. I don't think, because they would view it as this is going to hurt Trump. Anything that they perceive is going to hurt Trump, they're not going to do. And to the point that Daryl was making, I think the Supreme Court is doing everything they can. They're bending over backwards to help Trump slow walk his cases by, first of all, taking it up, right? And then making put it on a slow track so that it would delay him if they do decide that they want to make a ruling. It would be late enough where he couldn't be brought to trial before the election. That's what Trump is simply trying to do. He's trying to run out the clock because guess what, Stacey? If he is reelected, God forbid, then he is going to appoint an attorney general that is going to say, you know what, all charges are dismissed. Special counsel is fired. You know, he doesn't give a damn, right? He doesn't care about optics. He is going to be a dictator. He's already told you that, right?
Yes,
So
day one.
he will even pardon himself if he was convicted. He would pardon himself. So that's the kind of lawless president that we have. And so I think Trump is trying to do everything he can to win, but he wants to delay, and the Supreme Court is giving him all of the ammunition he needs in order to do that.
Yeah, and Attorney Jones, what happens as Representative Reynolds says? We know that if he wins the presidency, all of the criminal cases are totally dead. They go away. What happens to the civil judgments against him? Does that affect it in any way?
The judgments that have already been rendered remain in effect. But the question then becomes, with regards to the civil cases that will be pending against the civil president will be put on hold, and they will not go forward. The other interesting question that actually comes into existence becomes with that immunity question before the Supreme Court, because the question will be, will the Supreme Court try to narrowly tailor, and let's say they rule against them on the immunity question, as they rightly should. But if they rule against them on the criminal immunity question, will it then have the impact of going down to the state court in Georgia, to the state court in New York, or will they say only for federal crimes? So,
Right.
that's one of the questions that's there. But either way, if they say it's just for federal crimes, it's certainly going to be used by the attorneys in the state court to say if it's on the federal level, it should be on the state level as well.
Well, we saw something yesterday too with the charges. They're going to have to resentence a lot of individuals in the insurrection case, the Capitol case, the January 6th case. Darrell Jones, Attorney Jones, can you sort of tell us what happened there? And that also has implications for Donald Trump.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because what you have occurring with the resentencing cases is that you have the judges that are now bringing the cases back, and they're going to be revisiting all the information that's there with regards to the sentencing process and what the sentence, appropriate sentence should be that's imposed because of the arguments that have been obviously presented by defense counsel in those cases. It's like a lingering cold that just won't go away. You know, if we're going to impose these sentences, let's just got to be certain that you've touched all the bases and then move forward. It becomes a lingering cold that won't go away because I've argued all along that they've waited too long to
Yes.
start this whole process. You don't have to worry. Had this been the Black Voters Matter and the Transformative Justice Coalition, you wouldn't have people being gathered from around this country trying to go out to find them to bring them to trial and then slow walking it through the judicial process. It would have been expeditious. It would have been lightning, like what's it called, light breaking speed that it would have occurred. So this is part of what happens when you slow the process down and then have all of these things that occur. We wouldn't even be in a situation with former President Trump because that's something that would have happened up front. So, we wouldn't be in an election season trying to make these decisions and have these cases litigated.
Well, without Representative Benny Thompson, Representative Ron Reynolds, there probably would be no cases, right? I mean, he and his team had to basically do all the work that a prosecutor is supposed to do, and it took them time to do it. But to Attorney Jones's point, Representative Reynolds, this happened on January 6, 2021. Trump left office less than 2 weeks later. Why wasn't he arrested January 21st, 2021?
Stacey, I'm just going to keep it real with you. There are many people who are complicit. First of all, Congressman Benny Thompson, I was happy to be with him in Houston. Darrell, while y'all were in Selma, he was here. We were here helping Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, but it was good to see him. And every time I see him, I thank him for his bravery, for his leadership over the January 6th commission. And he did. They painstakingly went through the evidence. They did the job of what the Justice Department should have did, that they slow rolled, and they brought forth the evidence and put it on a bowl and said, here it is right here. And Liz Cheney, a Republican, was the vice chair, and she was thrown out of office, Stacey, because she did the
Yes.
right thing. How dare she go after Trump? And any Republicans who dared vote against him, any Republicans who wanted to hold him accountable, were deemed as rhinos. And most of those have either resigned, they didn't run for reelection, or they got defeated in primary. So Republicans are afraid of the Republican primary electorate that is very polarizing and MAGA. And they're afraid to hold Trump accountable for fear of retribution from Trump. And when he goes on Truth Social, when he goes on Twitter and rants about them, then he gets his base riled up, and they are afraid of their survival. So they're being more or politicians than statesmen. Statesmen would say, I'm going to do what's right for the country. I'm going to do what's right. If it means that I lose my office, that's what happened to Liz Cheney. She was a principled person. She put her country before her party. And because of that, now she's at home commentating. But Stacey, we have to have more people that vote in primaries that hold, because most of the elections are won and lost in primaries. This is Super Tuesday. There's only a small percentage of people that will be voting. Texas and other states are voting right now as we speak, and the polls will close today. That's going to decide a lot of these elections because of gerrymandering. Most elections are won or lost in the primary, whether it's Democrat, Republican, because of the way the seats are drawn. So very few elections are competitive in November because of gerrymandering. And so we need more people to vote in the elections. We need, if more people voted in Republican primaries or Democratic primaries, you wouldn't see people like Trump likely being winning these elections, right? Because most people who are independent, most people who believe in civility and believe in decorum, they don't support Donald Trump. But it's the extremists, those people who are anti-black, those people that don't want to see people who look like me and Daryl and you, Stacey, those people who are believe a woman should be in the kitchen, that don't believe in a woman's reproductive rights, that don't believe in voting rights, that don't believe in affirmative action. Those are the people that are supporting Trump the most. Those are the people that are the extremists that are voting in the Republican primaries.
Yeah.
So I believe that we have to get more people mobilized and engaged in voting in order to reset and get people in office that are going to represent all people and not just the extremists.
So Greer's asking this question, and I think it's really important question too. And either one of you or both of you can chime in on this. He says, with what we are seeing in the House, the role that Christian nationalists are playing in the courts and politics, how realistic are we being with all that's happening? Banning books, the DEI rollbacks, and low voter turnout, overturning constitutional laws across the country. Let's keep it real. Black folks are in trouble. Black lawmakers are in trouble. Why are we still expecting the system to change this around?
Well, I tell you, we got this to the point where we are now because of the system that was in place. That's how we got where we are. Yeah, we didn't just wake up one morning and there we are. It was a slow process that got us to where we are. And so now the question becomes, how do we work our way out of it? And I'm a proponent, and I agree with the question that on the federal level today, it would be very difficult. It won't happen. If you're relying on the House of Representatives to come and be your saving grace, it's not going to happen. But the way that we work our way out of it is we bring it down to the local level. When Representative Reynolds was speaking about the redistricting and the gerrymandering, all of that comes from the local level, from the state level. So we've got to be certain that we understand the game that's being played and the rules that are being created as we go along. And the game that's being played right now is a ground game, meaning that this in each individual state, we've got to be certain that we are getting out to register, we're getting out to vote, we're getting into positions to try to put people in places that will hold our interests in place. Once we have the representatives in place, such as Representative Reynolds, that are committed to the cause and committed to the people, then every 10 years, the lines are redrawn for the redistricting. And those individuals then will play a part in being certain that they're fair maps that are being drawn. And let me just be clear on one other thing, if I may, Stacey, because the cure for everything we're seeing, is found in the Freedom to Vote Act that is presented before Congress now. And we have got to be certain that we educate ourselves to know that the Freedom to Vote Act can address all of these things. It levels the playing field. It levels it for the gerrymandering, redistricting. It levels it for all of that. We've got to be certain that we hold our elected officials accountable to leveling the playing field. As Reverend Jackson loves to say, we're not asking for any special favors or anything. We just want the rules to be transparent. We want the scoring and the officiating to be fair, and the level and the playing field to be level, and we can deal with the results. But we got to level it all out. And that's what the FTDA does.
Oh, go ahead, Representative Reynolds.
Stacey, I just want to say real quick, I agree 100% with what Daryl just articulated. We need the Freedom to Vote Act. We need federal voting rights legislation, the John Lewis Voting Right, and the Freedom to Vote Act. We just had the anniversary of Bloody Sunday, and I was very proud that Vice President Kamala Harris made a call to action to pass these laws. If these laws aren't passed, then we're going to continue to see voter suppression. We're going to continue to see states like Texas and other Florida with these DEI, anti-affirmative action, this anti-woke agenda, rolling back the clock, rolling back the protections of hard-fought victories that we've made, that we've overcome from Jim Crow to women's right to choose. Basically, many of the advances that we've made because of the struggle, many people whose shoulders we stand on today. They made good trouble, and we have a lot of freedoms today. But those freedoms are at jeopardy. We've seen already an erosion of that as Greer put in, with these book bans and this anti-DEI movement. And so we need to have this federal voting rights legislation to protect the most fundamental right we have as American citizens, the right to vote. That right is sacred, but it is at peril if we don't take action. We will see more voter suppression efforts. And right now, that is what the Republicans and the MAGA extremists are doing. They're making it harder to vote by these extreme laws, these extreme voter ID laws, these laws making it harder for people to vote, harder for people to register, and easier for people to for example, purchase guns. That is the kind of things that we're seeing. So without that federal legislation, we will see more states like Texas and Georgia and Florida and these other red states, Mississippi, Alabama. We'll see these southern states do more to gut the voting rights law because of the Supreme Court decision in Shelby that allowed them to do that. So we need Congress to act. And that is why this election is so critical, because we need to get this federal voter legislation through and passed.
And Stacey, if I could add on to that,
Sure.
because there's some people that are going to be asking, you and that I and Representative Reynolds talk about, passing this FTVA through this Republican House of Representatives. How's that going to happen? That makes sense. They don't control the House of Representatives. Let's break it down real quick, right? Because we do strategy as well. And I don't support legislation just to support legislation that's going to die on the line. Here's what I'm saying. All right. We recognize that the Democrats don't control the House of Representatives right now, but I tell you what else we recognize, that it is so close with regards to the division that there are, and this is the strategy piece to it, right? That there are right now, as we speak, some 17 Republicans that sit in the House of Representatives that come out of districts that were won by President Biden. So if they want to retain their positions, then the Congressional Black Caucus and the Democrats that are in the House need to put the pressure on them. The people need to put the pressure on them to say, this is the issue that is going to win or lose your next election. This is the issue. Because those 17 Republicans that are in those Biden-won districts know that they're in the districts that can overcome them with a Democratic vote. So, and the support of the president. So that's why we say the Freedom to Vote Act is still, in place and in play in the House of Representatives.
Yeah, and gentlemen, Trump supporters have been deep faking images of the ex-president with black voters. We've seen new images and a new report that revealed dozens of AI-generated images have been concocted to produce pictures of black people supporting Trump in a bid to encourage more African Americans to vote for Trump in the 2024 election. A lot of problems with this. Talk about it from a legal standpoint, if Attorney Jones, and then Representative Reynolds from just a legislative or congressional standpoint.
Well, very interesting when it comes to AI. And AI is just going to play such an incredible role in the 2024 election cycle. And as you can see, it's already playing a role with the images that are being produced, people believing that images are real, that are not real. And so you have certain states, Michigan, Minnesota, a couple of others, that now are requiring that when AI imaging is used or AI messaging is used, that they must make the voters and the public aware that AI imaging is being used. So the concept here is to confuse the voters, and that's what AI does. Because it just gathers, information from wherever to create a message that will appeal to what the percentage of voters, what's on their mind and what they want to hear and what they want to see. So you end up with these images, and not mentioning that it's a cheaper way for the candidates to go because it's not as costly to put it all together. But the real problem is, in my mind, is that it creates an image that is untrue, and one that confuses voters as to what is what and what things actually mean. So on the legal side, the Congress has attempted to try to introduce legislation to deal with the artificial intelligence and things putting together. Of course, they can't get anything. Surprise, surprise! They can't get anything through the House of Representatives in this regard. But it is something that has to be done, and there's got to be some type of labeling. There's got to be some type of authority line. There's got to be nothing in small print. There's got to be something to let people know that the images that are created are not real images, but are generated by a computer.
Representative Reynolds, we've seen in the past Russian interference with the elections. We've seen so much false information, disinformation. Now you have this. How concerned are you and your colleagues in Congress?
I'm very concerned, Stacey, and I think Daryl is right. I think there should be some kind of disclaimer. I think there should be some transparency. I think there should be a notice to people that this is not real, that this is AI. And I think that without that, there's going to be a lot of people that are misled, or in the words of Malcolm X, bamboozled, hoodwinked, right? So we need to make sure that Congress doesn't punt, that they act, because this is very deceptive. And Daryl knows under legal law there's Deceptive Trade Practices Act. So there is legislation there. We just have to apply it in a new way to govern AI, because this right here can be very misleading, and this is very disingenuous. I think that this plays on people's ignorance. If you don't know, this looks real, and you can use people's likeness and create images, because people don't read anymore. They look at pictures. They oh wow, Trump is with. You can have an AI picture with Trump and Obama and say, oh yeah, hey, I'm supporting Trump, and then you don't even know. So yes, I think this is serious. I think this is something that has to happen. And I think
Let me
that
stop you for 1 second. You just said something. How surprised would you be to see something like
I
that
wouldn't be
today?
surprised, Stacey, because they look at what they did with the Russian interference. I'm glad you pointed that out. There were all kind of trolls. There were all kind of misinformation that is there. And when people see it enough, or they see it and put it on TikTok, on the internet, they say, "Oh, it must be true because I saw it. I saw it on YouTube. I saw it on TikTok." And so, yeah, there you go.
There you
People will
go.
believe that this is what is real, and then you're arguing, no, this is fake. No, no. Then you're in an argument. So yes, we have to have this for the sake of transparency, of the sake of making sure that people aren't misled and hoodwinked into believing certain things that are not real. I'm gonna use Trump's word. This is fake news, but people won't believe that it's fake because they see it and it looks so real. It looks authentic. I mean, when you
Yeah.
look at it, this looks like this is what it is. And so how can you tell people, well, this is generated by AI? They're like, what are you talking about? I saw it. So and then people want to believe what they want to believe anyway. So if you give it to
Yeah.
them and you say it enough, then it becomes the truth. So yeah, it's imperative that we have federal laws to regulate these type of images, because this will cause a lot of commotion and a lot of people being misled. And not, it's a slippery slope, because this can go into medical. You can have images with
Yes.
physicians saying, "Hey, this is what I do," and that could cause medical problems. It could
Well, we
cause
also saw it with the fake robocalls that Biden had
yes,
purportedly made. We saw that just a couple of weeks ago.
yeah, we did.
Um, Attorney Jones, though, while something came to mind too, I need to ask you. I mean, you're with the also with the Transformative Justice Coalition, a civil rights organization. Um, how troublesome was it for you, Attorney Jones, being so embedded in the modern day civil rights movement, to hear Donald Trump refer to the lieutenant governor down in North Carolina as Martin Luther King on steroids?
Uh, it, it, Look, you, I have never been lost for words, Stacey. You almost got me there. Okay, let me tell you, it was just horrible to have that type of comparison made, and to hear former President Trump, make this assertion. Just do it. It's so upsetting to see on a number of levels. It's upsetting because the lieutenant governor that's down there, he is the antithesis of what the African American community needs in this moment. And so for him to be used as the pawn that he's being used, and whether or not he knows that he's a grifter. Okay, you use the
Yeah,
Clay
a
King's where
walking
he's a
minstrel
grifter.
show.
So, a
say,
walking minstrel show. Yeah,
say it.
trying
Yes.
Amen. Amen,
to,
Stacey. You got that right.
he's trying to get paid for being a grifter. He really is. He wants to get his payday is putting down his people and putting in policies that are going to hurt the African American community. So to hear, Trump call this guy a Martin Luther King on steroids is simply horrible. And the worst part is, we know that Trump had so much support out of North Carolina that it may have some impact with regards to the election down there, and it really will be a setback for the state of North Carolina and the African American and the community as a
We,
whole for that. But I want to say one other piece, if I may, Stacey, because when we're talking about the AI images and we're talking about holding those officials accountable, here's the legal problem with that. When we start talking AI and politics and elections, there's a special protection that's given for political speech. And so, you can do more things you can lie, right, on the political speech side and not be held accountable because there is, more protection that's given because it's in the realm of the arena of politics, not simply in the arena of just being out there in the public trying to sell something.
Yeah, and we talked about the fake AI images. We learned too. You both, I'm sure, recall just a couple weeks ago down in, or a week ago, maybe it was a little bit more than a week ago, down in South Carolina, where Trump was purportedly speaking to a room full of black conservatives, where he continued
Ooh.
to praise the blacks and that they loved the fact that he had a mugshot. They could relate. Well, it turns out when the cameras were turned on that audience, when we got a different angle, there might have been what 500 people in the room, and maybe two or three people were black. So even he's not. It's not just his camp and his supporters pushing this fake images or imagery. It's him. He's behind it as well. It was all smoke screens and so we and there's that event that we're speaking about. Um when the camera pans, where are the quote unquote the blacks? They're not there. So, it's just incredible. So misinformation, disinformation, outright lies
There
are
you
being
go. Let's
told.
call it what it is. Lies.
Yes, outright lies, Representative Reynolds, and along those lines, just wanted to make sure that we got this into what's happening there. I wanted to get your take on the University of Florida eliminating all DE&I positions due to a new state rule that prohibits the addition of such programs. Um, this is an epidemic now, right? Banning, we mentioned a little bit earlier, banning books and by black authors and about black folks, and trying to take away the history. Now DE&I positions. Representative Reynolds, and we'll start with you on that
It,
DE&I discussion and the elimination.
Stacey, it's heartbreaking. I just recently became a national board member of the NAACP, and I'm very proud that the NAACP issued a travel ban to Florida after they initially did these things. I'm very proud of my fraternity, Alpha Phi fraternity, for deciding that our convention should not be held in Florida because blacks weren't welcome. And this is Ron DeSantis' plan up to his MAGA extremist base, using black folks as political pawns. Shame on them. Our diversity is our strength. These DEI offices were there to help level set historical racial discrimination and disparities that existed. So this is a troubling pattern that we're seeing from people like DeSantis and Trump and other MAGA extremists to appeal to the far right, worst racists. And this is terrible. This is going to be very problematic. I'll tell you this, they want our black athletes to play at Florida and Florida State, but they don't want our black students in the classroom. So it's okay for us to be on the football field scoring touchdowns or on the basketball court slamming dunking basketballs, putting people in stadiums, getting TV revenue, but they don't want black professors and academics in the classroom. And I think that's wrong. We shouldn't let our athletes go to Florida in Florida State. Let them go, if they're going to go to Florida, to a HBCU. Let them go to FAMU, because this is bad. I say the same thing for the University of Texas and Texas A&M. Let's send our athletes to other states or TSU and Prairie View, because they're sending the message that we're not valued. And I think this is bad. This is terrible, and we can't become numb to it, Stacey. We can't allow them to be comfortable. We can't, scratch when it don't itch and laugh when it ain't funny, because this is terrible. I'm disgusted by Governor DeSantis and his quote anti-woke agenda.
Well, we see it too in Alabama, where the mayor there, I forget what city now, but nonetheless, he's encouraging black students. The mayor of Birmingham, Randall Woodfin, encouraging black athletes to avoid state public colleges if they pass a DE&I, an anti DE&I law. Attorney Jones. So going along with what Representative Reynolds was saying, perhaps more of that action needs to be taken. I see some of the comments too. David Youngblood mentions the same thing too, or Power 96 mentions if all black student athletes were to abandon that, perhaps that's one way to combat this, Attorney Jones.
Well, that's certainly one way to combat it. But I tell you, one of the things that's also very concerning in Florida is that when you're talking about FAMU, or if you're talking about Edward Waters University, two black schools that HBCUs that are there, when we're talking about the funding coming from the state, that's any funding that's coming from the state then would be excluded, right, from their operational funds, and so it's going to have an impact and a strong and significant potential impact on the HBCUs. If they're accepting the funding, does that mean then, and it does, right, that they've got to narrow their curriculum and tailor their curriculum to meet with these state standards. And that creates just incredible problems to say that an HBCU would not be able to teach diversity, equity, and inclusion in its curriculum. I mean, it's just at the basis of the reason to have the HBCU, that focus on the on Black history, that focus on the struggle for equality in the United States. All of that becomes at issue there. So we were down in Florida for the Juneteenth, and we did a rolling protest through 15 different cities for the week of Juneteenth. And I can tell you that we got a chance to see firsthand the impact that this DEI contest, if you will, or whatever you want to call it, oppression is having with Black students and the Black community in the state of Florida. And it's a big fight. It really is. And I'm so proud of many of the African American residents of Florida who are coming together to stand up and to fight this back. I'm concerned because we have a lot of Mike Johnson type, the guy that's running for governor of North Carolina, a lot of Mike Johnson types that are down there that are afraid of DeSantis and afraid to stand up against these policies. But now is the time for all of us to come together to support those that are fighting to end the oppressive policies of the DeSantis administration in dealing with DEIs in the state of Florida and wherever they raise their head, whether it's the independent school district in Houston, wherever it is, that they are putting policies in places that are hurting African American and hurting the teaching of African American history. We need to be certain that we come together collectively to stand up and go against it.
Yeah, Representative Reynolds, real quick, Mike V writes in, he says, I'm interested in understanding why Kristen Clark from the Office of Civil Rights in the DOJ hasn't gotten involved in the defending of DEI with academic and workspaces. Where is the EEOC on this? Have you heard anything yourself?
Well, Stacey, it's funny you say that. I've called for federal intervention. I've called for the Department of Justice to get involved. I reached out. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and Congressman Al Green out of Texas are helping me with that, and so I'm hopeful and optimistic that the Biden administration will tackle this issue, because this is a critical issue facing our country, and I think that the Department of Justice, the Department of Education should be engaged in this fight.
Yeah. Gentlemen, a Mississippi Police Department in one of the nation's poorest counties unconstitutionally jailed people for unpaid fines without first assessing whether they could afford to pay them. Speaking of, according to the U.S. Department of Justice, that announcement came amid a Justice Department probe into alleged civil rights violations by police in Lexington, Mississippi. And that ongoing investigation, which began last November, is focused on accusations of systemic police abuses in the majority black city of about 1,600 people, which sits about 65 miles north of Jackson. Attorney Jones, the DOJ identified unconstitutional jailing practices there. How should this be addressed to ensure that these bad practices stop?
Well, one of the things that the Obama administration did under with Eric Holder is that they would go into these areas and they would end up working out some type of resolution where there would be an agreement that would be put in place, and they would be monitored by the Department of Justice to be certain that issues like this did not exist and were being addressed. And so, when we had those types of agreements, that consent agreements that were in place, we were able to then monitor and certainly minimize those types of things. Look, Lexington, Mississippi, it's not the only jurisdiction in the country that's
Right.
doing this. What they end up doing is they end up preying, PREY, preying on black folks to be able to pay white folks for monitoring these black folks. And so what we end up having is a system where you go to jail for being poor. That's what ends up happening. You go to jail for being poor, and that's problematic. And I certainly applaud the Department of Justice for taking the stand, and Merrick Garland for taking the stand. Heaven knows I give them enough grief for everything that I think that they're not doing. But when they're doing something that's right, like they are here, I think that we've got to stand up and applaud them. But we need to be certain that we start having these consent agreements that are entered across the country, every place that we can find injustices that are going to be being done like this, and to continue to monitor those consent agreements to be certain that people are not being put in jail because of being poor and they can't afford
Yeah.
fines,
And
fees, and
finally,
restitution.
thanks, Attorney Jones. And finally, Representative Reynolds, are there legislative models that have proven effective in promoting police accountability and justice?
Yeah, there are some, but we need federal legislation so that it can be uniform. We can't have some piecemeal. Uh, we have some good things like in California and some other places, but we need federal legislation so that it's uniform across all 50 states. That you won't continue to see these outliers in Mississippi and Alabama and Texas and Florida and these very conservative southern states. So that's why it's so important that we have comprehensive federal laws to protect all citizens, no matter where they are. So they should be able to choose to travel interstate and go anywhere, knowing that they'll be protected and they won't be charged for being poor.
Yeah, we continue. As you mentioned, as you both mentioned, this is not the only situation. Like with the DE&I, we're seeing it everywhere. We're seeing this the policing situation continue despite what we seen back in 2020. That whole movement after George Floyd. W- let's end it here. What happened? Or what didn't happen. We heard all the promises, all of the pledges, and everyone finally seemed to adopt the cause of the African American after George Floyd, and it quickly fizzled out. What happened?
I'll take a first stab at that, and I'll tell you first of all, Stacey, very quickly. I was so proud of the young people that marched and protested during COVID. They took it to the streets. They went in record numbers. We haven't seen since the civil rights era, right? They really mobilized using their social media platform. Black voters matter. Black lives matter. It was a wave. It was a paradigm shift. Unfortunately, we had the filibuster in the Senate that blocked federal comprehensive voting rights legislation. The Congressional Black Caucus, they led, and the under Speaker Pelosi, they passed federal legislation in the House. It was blocked and it was derailed in the Senate and never got a chance to become law. So we need to bring it back. There were some things that were done. but there was not enough done comprehensively. I passed in Texas the two provisions, banning chokeholds and created a duty for an officer to intervene. But we still need to deal with police, the immunity issue, so that there can be accountability for officers who do things like we saw with George Floyd. But certainly this cannot be over with. But it was the Senate, it was the filibuster, and I'm going to call out Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema who killed it. They killed the freedom to vote and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. That filibuster is a relic of the past, and it stalled that legislation from happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And got to ask this. I know we said final question twice, but here's the final. We are waiting still the judge's decision down in Georgia on whether or not he's going to uh, replace District Attorney Fani Willis. What do you guys see as the outcome? Attorney Jones, what do you see the outcome there?
I don't see her being replaced. I've said all along, and I'll continue to say it. This has been a sideshow, and this has been directed to try to move your eyes off of what you're after in front of you and turn it to some shiny object on the side of the road. And if we can get you to follow the shiny object on the side of the road, you forget what you were there for in the first place. That's what this is. It's a trial tactic. It's a trial technique. Get everybody's attention focused somewhere else. Throw enough mud on the wall, enough junk on the wall that perhaps the potential jury that will be put in place will be say, well, the prosecutors over there, we know they were messed up because we heard all the stuff about the affairs and all this other stuff that's going on. It's a sideshow. I think the things that I always tell people to be mindful of are two things. One, Fani Willis is up for re-election right now, and people need to be certain and I'm so proud of that sister. And I would stand with her shoulder to shoulder anytime. Number two, be aware that Judge McAfee is up for re-election too in Fulton County, Georgia. So, I think that you got to factor those things in to what's happening with this trial and be certain that again, I'm a boots on the ground person. I am so proud of the Black community, the African American community that came out in numbers to put Fani Willis in place as a prosecutor. This shows America what happens when the power of the Black vote comes together and decides to put somebody in place that is holding people accountable equally. And that's what we're seeing happen, is that former President Trump is being held accountable equally by this Black woman. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this, Stacey. Not only do we have Fani Willis doing that, but we also have Letitia James that did it up in New York. We have Brother Bragg that's doing it in New York, and we have Judge Chutkan, appointed by President Obama, that's doing it in D.C. So this is the power of that Black vote. This is what accountability looks like when you have elected officials that are doing what they were elected to do. So I don't see Judge McAfee removing Fani Willis. It would be horrible if he does it. There's no reason to do it. They can't point to anything and say that former President Trump has been prejudiced by the actions of Nathan Wade or Fani Willis in this case, which is the standard that they're supposed to be using. Is there prejudice? Is there something that's being done that's detrimental to the defense in this case? And there isn't.
Representative Reynolds, last word on that.
I agree with Brother Darrell in his articulation of the legal analysis, but unfortunately, I wouldn't be surprised if they did disqualify her. I think that it would be a wrong precedent. It would be certainly a dereliction of the judge's duty, but because he didn't follow the law. But I think that nothing surprises me anymore when it comes to some things. I'm tending to believe Darrell is right, but it wouldn't surprise me. But the damage is already done, regardless of what the judge rules. The damage is already done, and in the court of public opinion, they put her on trial for her act of, quote, indiscretion. They're saying that she had an affair. They said that she took money, that she's benefiting from this, that he's made tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars, that he wasn't qualified in the first place. So this has already cast a bad eye on her already, regardless of how the outcome is when the judge makes his final ruling. I think they put her on trial and that she's being deemed by the right as guilty as charged, and Trump is the victim.
Yeah. Well, Representative Ron Reynolds out of Texas and Attorney Darrell Jones, Transformative Justice Coalition. We appreciate you both for joining the Black Presses. Let it be known. Thank you all for watching. We will see you again tomorrow.
Thank you so much.